Welcome back. Explosive testimony today at the National Defence Committee. Former military ombudsman Gary Walbourne says he told Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan about a complaint against top military commander General Jonathan Vance back in March of 2018. He says the minister refused to look at the evidence. Walbourne says Sajjan also refused all subsequent requests for meetings. Retired General Jonathan Vance is facing a military investigation into allegations of inappropriate conduct while he served in the armed forces. Let's bring in MPs who are part of that committee. Karen McCrimmon is a Liberal MP and chair of the National Defence Committee. She's with us from Ottawa. James Bezan is a Conservative MP and vice chair of National Defence Committee. He joins us from Selkirk, Manitoba. And Randall Garrison is an NDP MP and member of that same committee. He's with us from Colwood, British Columbia. Hi to all three of you. Thank you very much for making the time. Just before we get into my questions, I just want to read, Minister Sajjan's spokesperson just emailed us a statement in response to this testimony. I just want to read a portion of it, what I would say is the relevant portion here at the end. He says, I disagree with parts of the testimony that occurred in committee today. As I have stated, I was as shocked as everyone else at the allegations that were made public last month. I can assure the committee and all Canadians that any allegations that were brought forward were very quickly put forward to the proper authorities while respecting the need to protect the privacy of any individuals involved. Any suggestion that I have done otherwise is wrong. Ms. McCrimmon, I want to start with you. Even if the quote-unquote proper procedures were followed by the minister, what Mr. Walbourne presented to the committee and to Canadians today was the idea that Minister Sajjan, pushed to the table, threw up his hands, and didn't want to look at the evidence that Mr. Walbourne had before him. If there were any questions at all about former CDS Vance's behavior, why on earth would Minister Sajjan keep him in that position and keep him in charge of Operation Honour?
Well, I tell you what, it has to be actionable. And that's the problem. And even Mr. Walbourne today admitted that what he had was not actionable. So people want to, we have to have due process. So, but if it comes back to whoever is the victim, the survivor, the person who has lived through this kind of trauma, you have to respect their wishes. And if they say, I don't want to lay a complaint, I don't want to bring this forward, then you have to respect that. And then going out of your way to say, oh, no, that we can do better, we can make it. Don't. Respect the woman's wishes. Respect the wishes of the people who had the courage to come forward and say something. And if they don't want to make an allegation and they just want to chat with you, maybe they went to him because they were worried. Like, is this going to look bad sometime? Is this very good? But I don't want to file a complaint. You got to do what they ask you to do.
So at the same time then, Ms. McCrimmon, as the minister, are you then to turn a blind eye and pretend you don't know about that and keep a man in charge of an operation meant to root out that kind of behavior, endemic behavior in the military?
No. What you do is you take it to the proper authorities like he did and said, look into this. Like, is this an issue? But PCO can call an independent investigation.
So can the minister.
If there is enough evidence. But if they have no evidence and they have no complaint and no allegation, they can't call an investigation.
Mr. Bezan, Ms. McCrimmon is making the point that the complainant in this, according to Mr. Walbourne, did not want to put forth that evidence to higher authorities. He went to Minister Sajjan for advice. Does she have a point in that it could not, what else was the minister supposed to do if that complaint couldn't go further?
Gary Walbourne has been a faithful public servant for over 30 years. And, here's a gentleman that said at committee today as well, that although she didn't want to move forward with her complaint in a formal fashion, she was looking for some assurances from the minister and that she would be protected. And of course, that didn't happen when you have Minister Sajjan pushing away from the table, refusing to even look at the evidence. Look, I was angry when these allegations first came to light. We don't know if these are the same allegations as Major Brennan that we've already seen on TV, or if this is something different. I'm assuming it's different. Otherwise, we'd be talking about the context of these allegations against General Vance. So Minister Sajjan knew about this 3 years ago. He hasn't been transparent with committee, and he has done nothing on these allegations for 3 years. He's angry or shocked. Well, I guess he's shocked because this all came to light in a public manner, and the media are reporting on it. The other part of this is that, you know, he talks about having zero tolerance for sexual misconduct, regardless of rank. Well, again, this proves that when it involved the Chief of Defence Staff, General Vance, 3 years ago, he sat on his hands. His words have no meaning, and the minister no longer has credibility. So the question becomes to Prime Minister Trudeau is: does Minister Vance or Minister Sajjan still have the confidence of the Prime Minister? Does Prime Minister Trudeau condone this type of misconduct by Minister Sajjan and not acting on sexual misconduct by the Chief of Defence Staff?
But again, but there was no complaint to investigate, right? There was a conversation that took place that Mr. Walbourne said he went there for advice, for guidance, but there was no concrete complaint to investigate.
So
and just quickly, I'll get you to answer that. And then also, do you think Minister Sajjan should resign?
Look, I think I first want to hear from Prime Minister Trudeau on whether or not, the actions and lack of actions taken by Minister Sajjan has a place within his cabinet. I think I'd like to hear from Prime Minister Trudeau before I hear from Minister Sajjan on this, or make my own pronouncement on Minister Sajjan's service as in the portfolio of national defence. But I'll say this again, that there is so many different options that Minister Sajjan had as the Minister of National Defence, and he's responsible for the Chief of Defence Staff, for the management of the Canadian Armed Forces, to ensure that morale and good conduct is taking place. And when you look at what he has not done versus when you hear from people like retired Colonel Michel Drapeau, who is a military justice expert, he could have opened up a board of inquiry under Section 45. He could have asked, the Chief of Defence Staff to step aside, just as we witnessed with Admiral MacDonald. General Vance could have stepped aside so that we could have an investigation outside of the chain of command, where he couldn't obstruct and stop it as the Chief of Defence Staff. So there are so many other options that he could have pursued and offered, I guess, assurance to the person that was bringing forward these allegations that they would be protected and that these would be addressed in a timely and forthright manner.
My colleague, Mr. Garrison Murray-Brewster, says that, and Minister Sajjan, I don't know if he said it himself, but he said he took it to the proper authorities. Murray has reported that he took something to the PCO, but the PCO said it wasn't actionable. Is there anything else from your perspective that the minister could have done, or was that the right route to pursue?
Well, the minister clearly has responsibility for the actions of the Chief of Defence Staff. And the proof of that is that our current Chief of Defence Staff, who has similar allegations of sexual misconduct, has been suspended. So what's the difference? In 2018, if the minister knew about this, why wasn't the Chief of Defence Staff suspended if the current one is suspended? But it leads to the broader crisis.
Ms. McCrimmon, just let him finish and I'll get back to you.
There's a broader crisis of confidence here. If we're going to have women serve equally in the Canadian Forces, then they have to have confidence that sexual misconduct is taken seriously. And what we have now is some very clear indications that those at the highest levels are not taking it seriously. And so we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to solve this. I believe the minister needs to come back to the Defence Committee and explain the discrepancies between his version of events and what Mr. Walbourne, who has no reason to mislead us, told us today.
I think that's where it does get puzzling, Ms. McCrimmon, because the minister did say what was alleged in Global News' original reports came as a shock to him. But part of what was alleged was also presented to him, according to Mr. Walbourne, by Mr. Walbourne in 2018.
No, he said that the allegations that came out last month were a shock to him. And that's true. That's my interpretation. I think they were a shock to a whole lot of people. But if you go back to what happened in 2018, Minister Sajjan did what the survivor wanted done, which was nothing. And if there wasn't enough actionable evidence, what are you supposed to do? You take it to PCO, you take it to a higher authority, they look into it, but then they ask, well, what does the survivor want? And this survivor said,
aren't you supposed to be worried? But with great respect, Ms. McCrimmon, aren't you supposed to be worried that if there's one allegation like this, there might be others, and it's time to figure out if the man you've put in charge of rooting out sexual misconduct in the military is positioned properly to do so?
It is all about people. In the end, this is what, and people thinking that they know better than the survivors is entirely the wrong direction to go. It should be about what the people need, what the survivors need, the people who have impacted. That has to go to the front of the line, not politics, not, other things like that. It's what that person wants.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm not hearing. Everybody else feels they know what's best. And that's not the case.
I'm not sure they know what's best. It's that there are now all these concerns about a man who, again, led those efforts, which we now see have not materialized in the way promised where Operation Honor is concerned. This is just one allegation. There are others as well, right? Mr. Bezan, I just have time for a quick comment from both you and Mr. Garrison. Look, Ms. McCrimmon makes the point there, right? Like if the complainant doesn't want it to go forward, why should we force that?
Well, you don't want to force them. You don't want to re-victimize. But at the same time, you do have some serious allegations. The minister had a chance to see the evidence, and he should have took appropriate actions with the Chief of Defence Staff, especially when the Chief of Defence Staff, General Vance, was in charge of Operation Honor. Now, Ms. McCrimmon says that he took it to the proper authorities, the PCO. Well, did he also take it to the Prime Minister's office back in 2018? Was the Prime Minister aware of this? And since the PCO and the minister were aware that General Vance had allegations against him in 2018, then why would they extend his service as Chief of Defence Staff, and why would they give him a big raise after that as well? So, there's a lot of questions about what went after that fact, and it looks more and more like this was part of a cover-up for 3 years rather than addressing the real concern here. And, at the end of the day, Justin Trudeau still has to answer if this is the conduct that's becoming of a minister within his cabinet.
Again, final word to you, Mr. Garrison, just very quickly. It's not a conclusion that was reached. It's not a conclusion to an investigation. It's an allegation that could never be investigated, right? Because the complainant did not want to come forward.
No, Mr. Walbourne clearly said that's not the case. The complainant came forward because she wanted action. I disagree with Ms. McCrimmon. She didn't come forward because she wanted no action. That makes no sense. She didn't want to be re-victimized. She didn't want to have harm to her career. A lot of things that victims don't want to have happen. No action is not the goal of coming forward to talk about it. And Mr. Walbourne was quite clear. He said if there was a process set up to do an investigation, he was prepared to go back to the complainant, and he believed that if there was a proper process in place, she would have come forward. Now, with hindsight, we know there are multiple complaints that have been reported about the behavior of General Vance, stretching back to before he was Chief of Defence Staff. So I think this focus on one incident here and people knocking supposedly on the wrong door is the wrong focus. Did the minister know he had somebody in charge of the Canadian military who should not have been in charge?
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much to all three of you for coming in tonight. Really appreciate your time. Karen McCrimmon, James Bezan, and Randall Garrison. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.